Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
Adán Ramirez was considered a composed, thoughtful, and consistent man. No matter what happened to him, he could sit under a tree and ponder his next strategy and tactics. As he thought, the storms would calm, and he would emerge from his shelter to calmly execute his plans. Some simply called him lucky. Adán, without offense, used to agree, saying, "Perhaps." In his youth, he used to hustle and bustle and almost justified himself, recounting how he started his business with 2 stalls and the hardships he endured. But who cared? Why did no one destroy him? He didn't know it himself. He simply lived by the saying, "Do what's right, come what may." He didn't even divorce his first wife and didn't trade her for a younger model. He raised 2 children. His son, David, brought him joy. He graduated from law school and became a valuable assistant and later a full-fledged partner in his father's wholesale business. It was as if everything was being created for him even before his birth. Adán wished for a son-in-law like that, but more down-to-earth, someone who could easily relate to people on the ground. David, after all, was more of a strategist. He couldn't control linear processes, it wasn't his thing. His youngest daughter, Aglaia, showed absolutely no interest in her father's company. Adán considered this normal and even rejoiced. It was fine, such business wasn't a girl's affair. He worked and earned largely so that Aglaia could choose activities she loved and not waste her energy competing in the tough, male-dominated world. And she did choose, she became a photographer. Not the kind that takes selfies and posts food and bouquets on social media, but a real photographer whose photos are bought by respectable magazines. She even won prizes at 2 international exhibitions and took photos with a film camera like in the old days. They say it was up to date. Adán wasn't particularly strong in the arts, but Aglaia indeed produced magnificent shots. Her father bought her a small studio. Let her work with joy. She didn't have many clients yet, and there probably wouldn't be many. But was that the most important thing? Friends and business partners also considered Adán lucky in this regard. Somehow, he miraculously avoided all the problems that other well-off fathers faced with their daughters. Aglaia didn't get into trouble, didn't indulge in drinking, and didn't oppose societal norms. She was simply immersed in herself and her passion, and making her happy seemed like the easiest task out of all the tasks Adán faced in life. As it turned out, it was too early to rejoice. Aglaia took on a project for a travel magazine, beautiful and romantic, to present domestic tourism from an unexpected perspective. So she went on a small bus journey with her best friend, who also acted as her assistant. This was not at all what her father had in mind, immediately offering places on a luxury cruise ship from his wife's friend's company. "Daddy, maybe I didn't convey the idea to you properly. Perhaps you didn't understand. The client doesn't need advertising for a luxury cruise. There's so much of it already. The client needs a fresh perspective from within on these places, without glamour, thoughtfully. I'm not a professional, of course, but I want to try. Maybe they chose me for a reason." And off she went. This work trip took a month instead of 2 weeks. Aglaia returned sun-kissed, happy, and glowing from within. Linda, Adán's wife, handed him a fan of printed photographs. "Look, the photos are so bright and warm. It's just a village by the river. The landscapes, the people, it all is so captivating. Aglaia's got talent." Not even 2 months passed before the young lady disappeared again and came home with a new series of exhibition photos. During a family dinner, David noticed, "Aglaia, the temperate zone seems to affect you like the Maldives affects others. You look stunning. You're some kind of phenomenon." "No, I just met enough people there who are genuinely happy, and it's true," Aglaia assured. Very soon, the most ordinary truth emerged. Aglaia started a romance in a picturesque village with a local. "What do you want, Adán?" Linda, his wife and the mother of his children, persuaded him with a pleasant, quiet voice. No one knew better than Linda what lay behind her husband's seemingly prudent calmness. Aglaia has been spoiled by your comfort. She never did anything unreasonable. That's abnormal too. Every girl experiences foolish love. Did you too? Adan snorted. Of course, I did. You were my foolish love, by the way. Back when you used to bring liqueurs of wild tropical flowers as gifts to my stern father, it just took some time, and circumstances turned you into my wise love. Aglaia will get over it and move on from this infatuation. It's just a desire for romance. You're grounded, while she's a creative soul. She needs to experience intense emotions. I'm surprised we've managed to avoid the problem of unsuitable suitors all these years while she was growing up. Don't pressure her, or out of a sense of contradiction, she'll continue these relationships. His wife smiled. She probably understood all this girly nonsense much better, that's why she was so calm. Adan trusted her, and not without reason. He hadn't found any more reliable support except himself. But by New Year's, Aglaia was heading back to the village again, and she didn't beat around the bush this time, stating clearly, Mom, Dad, I've realized that I've truly found the love of my life, and it's serious. We've decided to spend New Year's together. A friend, a farmer, is leaving with his family for the holidays, and he'll leave us the keys to his cozy house. If it's convenient for you, we'll come for the holidays, and I'll finally introduce you. Honestly, I'd really like that. Juan and I plan to get married in the summer. Adam was so taken aback by his wife that she broke the endless silence. Why are you pacing around the room like a lion in a cage? Lita, doesn't this situation bother you? You should talk to our daughter seriously. Adan, why don't you talk to her instead? You're an authority figure to her, and you're better at finding persuasive arguments. You know I'm too soft, and I'm not very convincing. Adan wanted to argue that this matter was not within his competence, that he wasn't strong in such delicate love matters. But for some reason, he responded aloud. All right, I'll do it myself. And that evening, he asked his daughter to come to his office for a moment. Dad, are you going to try to talk me out of marrying Juan? She asked from the doorway. You see, you're doubting yourself because you understand it's an absurd plan. I'm not doubting my decision. I just saw your face when I told you about my plans. You're very observant. You're an artist and smart, despite being creative, as far as I've noticed. So let's talk seriously, Aglaia. The idea of your unconventional marriage doesn't stand up to any scrutiny. For a happy marriage, people shouldn't be from different worlds. It's not about my ambitions, it's solely about your happiness. Your childhood, upbringing, education, and all your household habits and beliefs, they're all different. It's interesting now, it seems exotic and romantic, but in married life with such a difference, you'll start to regret your decision. You'll get tired very quickly. What comes naturally to you, you'll have to explain to him. What's the point? Dad, for you, the village is still something about peasants in bast shoes with pitchforks, Aglaia smiled. Juan graduated from a pedagogical university and came back home to teach children. It's a big village, no smaller than our district. Right now, he's a physics teacher and a homeroom teacher. In a few years, he's on track to become the school principal. Two families of successful local farmers with incomes probably not much less than yours have no problem being close friends with him. Juan is an interesting person and connects with everyone, regardless of social status. But farmers don't marry their daughters off to him, Adan said. They only have young children, still in school. So, you're not right, Dad. Aglaia, that doesn't make it any easier. A rural teacher and you. It's good for melodrama. Romantic. But not for reality. I just wanted to protect you from anything uncomfortable in life as best I could, and it's not your fault that you don't understand some simple things. Just ask your friend Camila, who was raised by a single mother. Would she want to marry a rural teacher? She'll give you a bunch of arguments against it because she knows firsthand what life's difficulties are like. And I don't want you to experience them. In my experience, a woman looks much more attractive when she doesn't have to struggle for existence and overcome difficulties. When a woman is careless, it adorns her, and if you're planting seedlings and managing household finances to make ends meet, then in 10 years, you'll lose most of your charm. I'm not going to financially sponsor such an enterprise. I'm sorry for being blunt, but I didn't raise you to marry someone like that. He doesn't even have basic ambition. He returned to the village after his studies, although he could have tried to achieve something in the city. Dad, have you ever considered that some people don't like living in the city? Life has changed a lot. Nowadays, plenty of people leave prestigious positions and move to the countryside to escape this eternal rat race. They work remotely and feel happy. And it's not uncommon. That's only if I or your stepdad Eduardo with his savings move, then yes. I know about the trend of a simple lifestyle, don't count me as outdated, but your intentions are not the same. To live as you wish, where you wish, you have to earn it first. You may think you're all grown up, but in reality, you're just a little inexperienced girl, and I won't let you make a mistake. Otherwise, it'll cost me a fortune as a father. Dad, you're the best father. I respect your opinion, but in matters of my personal life, I'll make all the decisions myself. I've warned you. I won't let you make a mistake, but I don't want to become a tyrant in your eyes. You're a smart girl. I hope you'll reconsider everything carefully, weigh it all up, and make the right decision. I'll keep quiet and do it my way. I've already decided everything, Aglaya mentally replied. Dad, okay. I promise I'll think about it again, she replied aloud. Before, Aglaya secretly believed that serious relationships were unlikely to come her way and, even more so, that she would never want to get married. Not because she thought it was a bad idea. For example, her mother could hardly be imagined as unmarried. Many acquaintances of hers, women and girls, were the same. There are always those who are lucky in their personal lives. But Aglaya herself, by all factors, wasn't cut out for relationships. The guys she met weren't terrible people at all. They just wanted her to be the way they imagined her, or someone worth fighting for, like a prize. This meant she had to build her value and seem intriguing and unattainable. And a lot of other nonsense, which was tedious to waste time on. Many of her friends loved this game, but she didn't feel like playing it. What's the point of pretending to be someone else? And if one wants to get someone seriously, pretending to be some mysterious airhead is just stupid because one won't act like an actress from a burnt-out theater their whole life. You're just lazy, Aglaya. You don't want to work on relationships, her friends would say. And they were right. Aglaya just shrugged and disappeared into space as soon as she found out that guys needed to be attracted to some sort of game. There were so many more interesting things in life. I envy you, honestly, her best friend Camila confessed. You're fantastically self-confident. You seriously believe that you're interesting just the way you are. And it's true. Most girls doubt their worth, and you don't. Do you doubt it? Aglaya asked slyly, looking at her bright, spectacular friend expectantly. I have many insecurities, Camila announced, tapping her nails on the table. I'm just trying to hide it behind an extravagant image. But it doesn't work. I'm a shy, awkward girl from the outskirts who got lucky to become the trusted confidant of a wealthy friend. But you have an amazing sense of humor and self-irony. And you have the kindest heart and the richest imagination. But it's true, I haven't seen anyone suitable for you among our acquaintances yet, but if I do, I'll let you know right away so you don't miss out. Camila was always by Aglaya's side when it came to new projects. The practical friend willingly took on the administrative side of any idea. Self-absorbed Aglaya didn't want to take money from her father. At most, she took the bare minimum if she couldn't avoid it, and she was very worried that she couldn't manage everything completely independently yet. Camila knew how to save brilliantly, budget, and was generally friendly with money. But if I had a loving, well-off dad, I wouldn't hesitate to appoint him as the main sponsor of the photo empire, the friend joked, as tradition dictated already. You might think so, Aglaya objected. But if my dad fully sponsored my projects, I'd feel like a little girl playing with daddy's toys. Those would be toy projects. Anything for the quiet life of a child. I want to achieve everything on my own. Not out of stubbornness or principle. It's just more interesting and pleasant for me. When the conversation turned to her favorite subject, it became difficult to argue with Aglaia. She felt confident only when engaged in creativity, but in ordinary life, she thought she was completely ignorant. On this summer trip, the friends, as usual, set off together. The first week went fantastically well. And somehow, Aglaia woke up early in the morning and looked at the strings of birch branches swaying outside the window of the small hotel, superstitiously thinking, everything is going too smoothly. I hope nothing bad will happen. And that same evening, she twisted her ankle on the muddy, marshy riverbank. When she tried to get up, she even cried out in pain. The only consolation was that her faithful Canon camera was unharmed. Her beloved old camera understood perfectly what was required of it. But leaning on her leg on the uneven shore was unbearably painful. Camila shook her head angrily. She had a long way to go to reach the car. I'll have to be your crutch, she waved her hand, conveniently taking Aglaia under her arm. And they continued hobbling along. Juan didn't suspect that it would feel so amazing. Ignacio, the most promising of his students, whom he had been tutoring 3 times a week for the past 3 years, got into the technical university. Exactly where he had planned. Now they were walking side by side along the riverbank. Ignacio was sharing his news and occasionally awkwardly repeating it. This is all thanks to you, Juan, I understand it very well. Juan, unaccustomed to praise, was just as embarrassed as his student. If you hadn't set yourself a goal and worked towards it, no matter how talented the tutor from the capital, he wouldn't have helped you. But even my mom didn't believe in me. I felt it. She didn't say anything, but she doubted, and I heard once that she told Grandma the education in rural schools is much weaker than in urban ones. That's why the prospects for my son, a single mother's child from the village, to enter a university and get a scholarship are almost non-existent. And we can't afford to pay. Have you heard what she keeps telling everyone now? Only Juan believed in Ignacio and tutored him for free. Juan smiled, immediately recalling his own grandmother's grumbling. That brazen Margarita, seeing that the teacher is a greenhorn who only graduated from college, offered to tutor her Ignacio for free. You should have spent all your evenings with him. She made you feel pity for her because she couldn't afford to pay for it, but she could at least pay with goat milk for the sake of decency. She has a goat. Grandmother Laura was in her 9th decade but was active and sometimes even formidable. Granny, we already have 2 goats ourselves. Why do you need more milk? Laughed. Margarita always treated me as if I were her own. She gave me pies or cottage cheese. Her pies aren't that great, Laura scoffed skeptically. Granny, Ignacio is talented, and she never asked for anything for him. We talked a couple of times with Ignacio, and I decided to help him myself. I don't work just for money. I want my students to achieve something better. Everyone should mind their own business nowadays, the grandmother said. But almost a day didn't pass without her at least briefly recalling brazen Margarita. But Juan indeed wanted to see the payoff from his work. Things were tough from the start. Most of his students, as he saw it, were not interested in his favorite subject, physics, at all. The girls got bored in his classes and didn't hide it when they realized that the handsome young physicist couldn't get captivated by their pretty eyes. The boys, those who wanted to achieve something, planned to get into a lucrative trade like auto mechanics, and few wanted to delve into science. Some were downright rude, smirking at the young teacher's desire to maintain discipline in class. After just 1 month of work, Juan began to doubt. Was it reasonable to return home to teach? With his diploma and tutoring practice during his senior years, he could well try his luck in a decently paying private school in the city, where his knowledge would be appreciated at least financially. Or maybe he was wrong about his job if doubts were already gnawing at him at the beginning of his career. But Ignacio greatly helped him. The longer Juan worked with the boy, the more clearly he understood that even one such student gave meaning to his work for the whole class. So he needed to thank the boy in return. Ignacio interrupted Juan's thoughts. "Look, Juan, it seems something happened." Juan quickly shifted his gaze to the path where Ignacio was pointing. He could see two girls going around the bend in the river. One was limping heavily, while the other supported her and spoke quite loudly, half-jokingly, to support her friend. "Why have we come to this swamp, Aglaya? Sometimes your creativity goes overboard, and poor Camila suffers. And here come two representatives of the local fauna, quickly heading our way." The sturdy brunette had excellent diction, and Juan couldn't help but smile upon hearing her words. As he laughed, he suddenly made eye contact with the second girl, a fragile brunette with reddish strands in her long hair. Her gray-blue eyes looked puzzled and apologetic. She realized that strangers had heard everything. Juan stopped at a respectful distance from the girls so as not to startle them, and Ignacio followed suit. "Hello, I see you need help. We're not dangerous people. I'm a local physics teacher, and this is my graduate. We can take you to the hospital and then wherever you say." The brunette snorted quietly. "I have my documents with me. You can photograph them and send them to anyone," Juan offered. "Show them," the brunette agreed. "Camila!" the limping brunette scolded. "What? I can't trust two strangers on a deserted shore." Although a rural physics teacher is quite an original legend for a miscreant. "Excuse my friend," the brunette intervened, smiling tiredly. A mischievous spark suddenly flickered in her eyes. "She has such a sense of humor, but she's very kind. Our car is nearby, less than a kilometer away. There's just a roadside grove hiding it. And it's not an off-road vehicle, otherwise we would have parked closer to the river." "That's very close. I can quickly take you to the car if you allow." "If it's convenient," Juan said. With surprise and annoyance, Juan noted that he was speaking clumsily. For a moment, he even thought he saw Ignacio smirk slightly. The teacher's usual eloquence had eluded him. The brunette smiled at him. "We let you do it. It's okay," she declared. "I'm completely exhausted. I'm not competent at caring for the wounded." The graceful brunette lightly touched his sleeve with her hand and instantly dispelled all of Juan's confusion with a single gesture. "I'll be very grateful to you for your help." Juan easily lifted her into his arms and carried her. Her friend walked ahead, while Ignacio brought up the rear along the narrow path. At first, they walked in silence, and Juan found it comfortable to walk that way. For some reason, he was sure that the girl felt calm and comfortable too. Unexpectedly, Ignacio was the first to break the silence. "By the way, my name is Ignacio, and this is Juan." "I'm Aglaya," the girl in Juan's arms said briefly and amiably, "and this is my friend Camila." Camila needed to think aloud about important matters and trivialities alike, so among her close friends were only those who knew how to listen. When she was reassured at the hospital that her friend didn't have a leg fracture, just a dislocation, she let out a loud sigh and immediately transitioned to more pleasant topics right in the hospital corridor. After all, she had sent their new acquaintances to the store for refreshing drinks to share her thoughts with her friend. "Aglaya, your knight is quite handsome." He was tall, serious, and even somewhat dignified in his way. But, of course, still very provincial. "He's missing something. Let me find a more precise definition now." "He's lacking in airs," Aglaya suggested, "your favorite part." "He's a normal person, can you imagine?" "Wow," Camila responded meaningfully. "By the way, I'm not arguing with you. You're right about me. Did you hear what the doctor said when she fixed your leg? In a couple of days, the pain will completely go away, and you'll be able to enjoy the most impressive sights of the surroundings with a personal guide. I'll be pleased to see how this guide rejoices at the idea that you'll accept his offer. I even envy you. You'll have something to remember about this trip besides the beauties of nature and architecture. You're talking as if you won't be with us. The offer to help us with work included you too, and you're just inventing some spicy stories out of nowhere. Of course, I won't be there. I appreciate politeness, but I don't take it at face value. This local caballero will only see you anyway, and I'm not making things up. You know me, I'll find something to occupy myself with. Even alone, I'm never bored. I'm already sketching out some exciting plans. And where are you rushing off to so quickly? Even I, with healthy limbs, can barely keep up with you. Be careful, friend. When they returned to their room late in the evening, Camila fell asleep immediately after taking a shower, barely making it to the bed. She could fall asleep anywhere, even on the lower bunk of a sleeper train or in a waiting room. Aglaya breathed a sigh of relief. She just wanted to sit alone in silence. Before her, there was a chubby mug of ruby homemade cherry juice, which Juan's grandmother had treated them to. If you could call it a treat, it was more like the presentation of a 5-liter jar. It'll give her a fresh complexion, Juan's grandmother stated categorically, unsettling Aglaya. Was she so pale and colorless that she needed urgent rescue? Now Aglaya was quietly reminiscing about the details of the day. Nothing special. Juan took her to the car, aboard Ford on the highway, and returned for his motorcycle, leaving Ignacio with the girls. Then the young people went ahead, showing the shortest way to the local hospital, and when the paramedics said Aglaya's dislocation, they went visiting. It took them a long time to get there. On the way, Aglaya kept stopping the car, anticipating successful shots. Maybe tomorrow the light will be completely different, she explained her frequent stops. Aglaya is a quirky, artistic person, Camila confirmed mockingly. If you meet her, you should put up with her. We're not in a hurry, Juan assured convincingly, immediately stopping in those places that seemed worthy of Aglaya's attention. The light on that day was indeed somehow special, dense, and multi-layered. Aglaya got so carried away that only when they finally arrived at the large village they were heading to did she think to thank Juan. Thank you for your patience and guidance, Juan. You have an interesting perspective. Behind Juan's back, Camila chuckled silently, while Aglaya hastened to explain to the suddenly bewildered guy. Perspective is crucial in photos, as it conveys a worldview, the arrangement of objects, and whether there's a sense of depth in the photographs. You have an instinct for it. Then they met Juan's mother and grandmother and talked entirely relaxed over dinner, like old acquaintances. Within the first half hour, Camila playfully won over Grandma Laura's sympathy. Soon they found their topics to talk about and chatted away, paying no attention to the others. Juan's mother took it upon herself to question Ignacio in detail about his upcoming studies. Everyone seemed to have tacitly agreed, without actually discussing it, that Juan and Aglaya should have stayed alone together. And she was grateful to them all and somehow knew without a doubt that he was too. By the end of the evening, it seemed like they already knew a lot about each other. Even things left unsaid. It wasn't until a week later that Aglaya realized something was off with Camila. When she realized what it was, she was surprised. Her favorite companion had almost stopped making teasing comments about Juan, which had sparked during the first 2 days. That didn't seem like Camila. But Aglaya didn't want to ask about the reasons for such a change. Her friend had met a charming chef from the restaurant, and now, as she put it herself, her only concern was not to get excessively fat. Aglaya marveled at how easily Camila treated her romances, which were indispensable for any trip. She radiated, chattered, and laughed. She seemed immensely engaged, and then easily said goodbye and fondly remembered. It's just a way to live pleasantly and to feel life in all its fullness. It's so obvious, Camila sincerely marveled, and turned surprising Aglaya with her amazement. And now Aglaya felt unquestionably happy and unbelievably foolish. She managed to fall in love, and instead of enjoying life, she worried about the inevitable upcoming separation. Wasn't she a silly girl? Maybe she never grew up. For her, it was still an unknown planet. It was dangerous to give importance to what was happening between her and Juan. What if she just made it all up herself? Her imagination was so easily caught in such a trap, after all. Juan never even hinted that there was something more between them than just the friendship of fairly kindred spirits. Although that might turn out to be an illusion. She grew up in a completely different world, with different parents. She couldn't imagine her life without many things that Juan did perfectly well without. He even spent his vacations at home and didn't consider it wasted time. He even helped with repairs at school during his vacation. It just didn't make sense in her mind. And yet, Aglaya felt like he understood her in everything. His sweet, somewhat taciturn mother, Eleonora Garrido, was nothing like the rural aunts depicted in movies and cheap novels. She looked at Aglaya and her son with sadness in her eyes and also remained silent, although she had figured out exactly what had happened. And for some reason, under her gaze, Aglaya felt awkward, as if she had done something wrong. It was silly, but true. Increasingly, under various pretexts, Aglaya refused to visit Juan's home after spending the day or evening with him. And the photos from that trip, when Aglaya scrutinized them critically, also talked about her secret. The client was completely satisfied with the materials she sent and praised her. This is the kind of romance that will captivate a tired city manager just starting to consider a river cruise destination. Juan's vacation was coming to an end, which was very timely. It was long overdue for Aglaya to return home. A couple of corporate clients and the organizer of a trendy autumn photo exhibition had already called her. Imagine, I was already worried that I couldn't get anything done. It's not a job, it's a hobby for daddy's girl. And suddenly everything seemed to start moving forward, she confided in Juan. You will succeed, because this is all yours, and the clients understand that immediately, he asserted with his usual directness, at which Camila used to chuckle. Aglaya was at a loss. She was leaving soon, and he was acting as if he was happy that she would have something to do. Yes, she was just a friend to him. On the day of her departure, as she walked out of the hotel's palisade to the car, Aglaya noticed Juan from a distance. He was unmistakable on a motorcycle with a huge bouquet of bright flowers. He stripped Grandma's garden bare, Camila commented contentedly. My friend Laura will give him a good scolding, despite his age and his teaching status. You can't call that bouquet refined. Your guy is quite the Mowgli. I have rough tastes, that's all, Aglaya replied, shrugging with mischievous nonchalance, and stepped into the middle of the narrow street, where the motorcyclist was approaching. She had to go home. Maybe that was good. Everything at home would become so simple and ordinary. As it should have been, to see more clearly what to think and do next. The parting she had feared so much suddenly turned into calm and complete joy for Aglaya. How could she have doubted that her love was mutual? Come in September to shoot for the autumn exhibition. Please. I'll be waiting for you, Juan blurted out in one breath as she was already closing the car door, leaving only a strip of airspace between them because of the half-open side window. Aglaya understood without a doubt, he just didn't dare say more because he doubted its necessity. I promise. I'll text you in advance when to expect me. Will you be busy with work? I won't take on any extra sessions in September, Juan replied. But I'll always make time for you, no matter what. Feel free to text me whenever you feel like it. I will, Aglaya assured him. So it's settled, we'll keep in touch. And she reached out her hand to him. And for a while, he just held it in his palms. Aglaya was going home daydreaming, while Camila was animated and openly pleased with life. She opened her travel bag and pulled out neatly packed, pyramid-shaped food containers. Do you feel those divine gastronomic aromas in our car, Aglaya? We've got the most tender julienne and ham here. Let me ask you straight, did I gain much weight this month? You look wonderful. And you're getting on my nerves with your worn-out record about getting fat, Aglaya laughed. I'm more concerned about the guests at your Estefanio restaurant. He was so sad to part with you that he might mess up a few dishes because of you. Don't badmouth a professional, Camila declared firmly. Estefanio is resilient. And I'm not sure, but I might change my principles and support these delicious relationships for me. I understand that my best friend was stunned. Listen, Aglaya, while traffic is calm here, can I bother you with some questions? Notice that I restrained myself during our magical business trip. How's your Mowgli? Camila, please don't call Juan like that. It's like you're not my best friend, but there's some office gossip. And, sorry, but honestly, Juan is much more educated than most of your boyfriends I've seen in the past couple of years. Well, okay. I didn't aim to match them by intellect. Aglaya, is everything so romantic that we can't even laugh it over without ruining your romantic mood? Camila, if you're curious to know what happened, I'll tell you honestly, nothing. Camel was a bit taken aback and fell silent, throwing off her usual demeanor, which was completely unlike her. But once she regained her composure, she said, "If I didn't know you so well, I wouldn't believe it. From the outside, it looks like everything between you two was just perfect, but in that case, I'm not even going to refrain from my words. Your physics teacher is just Mowgli." Adan decisively declined the invitation to the pre-New Year corporate event of a business partner and didn't even lie, citing the reason, unresolved matters requiring urgent personal intervention. Most women of all ages, as far as he knew, believed in this omen: one will spend the year with people whom they have spent the new year with. If Aglaya's plans for New Year's, which she had drawn up for herself, collapsed because of her rural beau, it would be much easier for her to forget about him. She would mope a little, be melancholic, shed some tears, and post some profound philosophical statuses on social media. Nothing new or scary, no one had died from it yet. Everyone recalls it later with irony and tells their daughters and granddaughters about it. Aglaya still had many happy and successful New Years ahead of her. She was still young anyway. She resembled him. She was her father's daughter. She put on an indifferent face and promised to think about it, but she had already made up her mind. However, it was difficult to blame the guy, as Adan could guess. He was enterprising and sensed how she should have behaved with his daughter to quickly achieve an effective result. Adan found it hard to judge him. It's the squeaky wheel that gets the grease, as one of his old friends used to say. He thought, go for it, buddy, just not at the expense of my daughter. I'm ready to help you a bit myself, just don't ruin her future. Especially since I am to blame for this situation, I should have raised Aglaya a little differently so she would have some idea of real life. He raised his son David like that, and the results were pretty good. But he entrusted his daughter completely to Linda and her methods, theaters, museums, music, art, and a gymnasium with an artistic focus. Everything about intense emotions. Linda dreamed of giving Aglaya everything her childhood and youth lacked. Let it be natural for Aglaya from childhood to speak and reason beautifully and interestingly, not to get lost in the circle of decent people, like I did until I was 35, his wife firmly declared. No, it wasn't bad, everything was fine and beautiful for refined girls. There have become fewer and fewer such diamonds these days, and that has made them more valuable. They weren't made for the struggle of life, so they must have been carefully passed from the hands of a reliable, well-to-do father to the hands of a reliable and well-to-do husband, not handed over to cunning gold diggers dreaming of changing their social layer at their father-in-law's expense. Adan gave the necessary instructions to his deputy about pre-New Year shipments, informed his family that he was going on a 2-day business winter fishing trip to the tourist base to establish contact with a new profitable supplier, and drove off with his driver to the village to persuade the unwanted son-in-law to break up with his daughter. He weighed the thick, respectable envelope with cash in his hands. Perhaps this argument looked convincing. The amount was enough to buy a good one-bedroom apartment. Adan personally monitored the real estate market. Besides, the guy wouldn't even have to make any heavy or unpleasant efforts and would use his imagination. Adan himself came up with the breakup scenario. No mudslinging, so as not to traumatize the sensitive, delicate Aglaya. Let there be a new young colleague, a kindred spirit from the same circle with a similar fate. He met his true soulmate and immediately realized it, and he wouldn't have been able to give her what she deserved anyway. And so on. The village on the spacious riverbank turned out to be quite beautiful, although it looked much more attractive and picturesque in his daughter's photos. But that's what the client pays for, it was planned that way. Besides, it was summer then, and now it was winter, but spending time with friends fishing here would still be pleasant. Adan immediately and decisively rejected the idea of showing up directly at the school where his daughter's fiancé worked. That would make the guy feel more negative towards him. After all, he would then have to answer questions from curious teachers. Not so many things happened there, and a stranger's visit in an expensive car would arouse interest. It was better to visit his home and have a heart-to-heart conversation in a calm atmosphere. He decided to find out the address on the outskirts of the village from a busy man in his 60s who was digging around in an old car on the street. Such a person surely wouldn't be interested in gossip. "Excuse me, could you tell me how to find the house of the local physics teacher? Do you need Juan Garrido?" The man replied with a polite and different voice, deeply engrossed in his affairs. "You've got one physicist here, right?" "We've got plenty of physicists and poets around here," the man also politely and indifferently chuckled, barely looking at Adan and his driver but respectfully appraising the wealthy SUV. "But there's only one physics teacher, Juan. Just down our street, on the right side, the 7th house. They recently covered it with siding on the facade, so you won't miss it. There are no other new facades nearby. The fence is freshly painted too, kind of like coffee with milk. The house turned out to be small, well-kept, and even tasteful." Adan couldn't deny that. "Oh, rural intelligentsia," Adan chuckled to himself, mentally assessing the right tone for the conversation. The door to the house was slightly ajar. This wasn't visible from the road. Neighbors didn't have anything to take from each other. Visits didn't count, they just came to chat. Just in case, Adan still knocked. And from somewhere in the nearby rooms, he heard a melodious female response. "Yes. I'm home, come in." He entered a short, narrow hallway, smelling of spices, and immediately saw the silhouette of the hostess, who came out to meet him, probably from the kitchen. While the sun was in his eyes, Adan couldn't see the woman clearly, but he already had a suspicion, and when she stepped out of the circle of light, he stopped. The man had said, Juan Garrido. But Adan hadn't paid attention to the surname. He immediately understood everything. "Eleonora? Eleonora Garrido? And I recognized you right away, Adan," the woman remarked calmly, also recognizing him instantly. Adan came from a very simple family. His father was just an engineer, and he was the first person in the family to even think about getting a higher education. There were no office workers in their family, and there were no savings either. So, the family survived all the charms of the economic crisis, just like millions of others. It wasn't even interesting to talk about it, everything was so cliched. The word business frightened his parents, and they were horrified by Adan's fanatical determination to work for himself. But they knew his character was useless to object to, they had to accept it and let fate decide. Especially since their son approached everything he did seriously and wasn't inclined to empty adventures. In general, he relied more on his abilities than on luck. Starting with 2 stalls, Adan soon became the owner of a small wholesale shop warehouse, and then another one. He increasingly found himself in need of legal advice. He didn't want to blindly stumble into new heights, it was better to invest in a professional, otherwise he could end up losing much more. Adan carefully chose a lawyer based on reviews and recommendations. Nemesio Perez was considered an eccentric person, old school, not working with everyone, choosing clients based on his principles, and not overcharging small businessmen like Adan for his services. Competitors gossiped that I'm simply not confident enough as a lawyer, so I don't work with big players, he ironically remarked to Adan, his long-standing client, who introduced them to each other. Let them think about what they want. In reality, I just have a crude, selfish interest. I enjoy my work, and I derive pleasure from breaking the law of meanness. Seeing Adan's expression, the lawyer sensed that he didn't understand, so he explained with pleasure. My client and almost a friend told me about you, that you started your business from scratch, without experience, connections, or any hereditary predisposition. I like such people. People like you give me hope that there's some sense in the sharp change in the social system after all. People have been given a chance to become masters of their destiny, not to dance to the tune of others. So, let's work together if you want. My work isn't that expensive. I'll give you a price list, and you can pause to meticulously compare it with competitors. Adon had indeed meticulously been comparing prices for 2 weeks and then turned to Nemesio and never regretted it. Once, when he, for the only time in his life, yielded to his partner's urgent request and got involved in an adventure for big, easy money, he could not only have gone bankrupt but also ended up behind bars if not for Nemesio's cool-headed ingenuity, which brilliantly turned the case in his favor. His lawyer turned out to be an attorney as well. "You're like a second father to me," Adon swore in an expensive restaurant, slightly tipsy, as he treated his beloved lawyer after the case was closed. "You can call on me anytime, day or night, if you need my help." "Let's skip the grandiosity," the lawyer requested with a friendly, soft smile. "Just promise not to get involved in any nonsense." And Adon, indeed, never got involved in any nonsense again. He quickly learned from his mistakes and was cautious and calculating. Especially since his little son David was growing up, Linda asked him to always remember, first and foremost, about their son when making decisions. As for Nemesio, who had turned 50, he had a young wife, Eleonora, the same age as Adon. She was not a second or third wife that a man left for, but the first and only one. Nemesio just didn't get married for a long time. It hadn't been a priority. When Adon heard about this couple, he imagined everything completely differently than it turned out in reality. However, he was not alone. Almost everyone made mistakes until they got to know the lawyer's family better. Eleonora came from a village, from the depths of the Central Strip somewhere. She came to study at a medical college. Of course, she didn't get in on the first try. The program at the village school was weak. It was naive to hope without having truly outstanding abilities. But she didn't want to go back home, so Eleonora applied to the medical college. But studying was one thing, and she needed something to live on. The money her mother could help Eleonora with was meager, and it was embarrassing to take it from her mother, who could barely make ends meet. So, the girl got a job as an evening caretaker, looking after and caring for an old, capricious lady in her 90s. The salary offered was surprisingly good, but the lady's grandson warned Eleonora right away. "Our grandma is capricious, with serious mood swings. Just so you're prepared, you might not be able to handle it. She's already kicked out 5 caretakers. We pay well precisely because we understand how tough the job is. If you manage, we'll highly appreciate it. Talk to the daytime carer, she'll confirm my words." Eleonora was a bit scared to start such a peculiar job, but luck suddenly was on her side. The old lady, Marina Fernandez, almost immediately liked her. She turned out to be not a capricious old lady with mood swings, but an educated old lady with a sense of dark humor and dignity, and her children and grandchildren simply didn't like her. However, not without reason, she mysteriously sighed. Eleonora didn't dare to ask about the essence of these reasons, but she didn't believe that Marina could consciously harm anyone. Eleonora had worked for her for 6 months, and then Grandma Marina died. It was poisoning, drug overdose. The examination showed that the drug was administered by injection, and the old woman couldn't have done it to herself, not least because there were no such drugs in the house. The daytime carer was lucky, she was on vacation. Eleonora was accused of Marina's death. The girl seriously thought about leaving this world as soon as a suitable opportunity presented itself. She faced a serious sentence, and there was no chance of salvation. Marina's family was wealthy and influential, and Eleonora's life was worthless. But soon someone came to visit her in prison whom she had only seen in movies before. Her friend Lorenza, the most active and cheerful girl in medical college, searched and found someone willing to defend Eleonora through her numerous acquaintances. That someone turned out to be Nemesio. All those involved in the investigation soon felt uncomfortable under his piercing gaze. With the help of independent expertise, he managed to prove that Eleonora couldn't have been guilty of Marina's death. The injection, based on the characteristics of the drug and the time of death, could only have been administered when Eleonora was taking an exam at a medical college, and there were plenty of witnesses to that event, as well as a mark in her grade book. If it weren't for Nemesio, no one would have dug so deep for some rural girl. They talked about it in the corridors. Eleonora was released with joy. Everyone was already tired of her lawyer. And 6 months later, Eleonora and Nemesio got married. When Adon learned this fascinating story, everything seemed clear to him. The girl got lucky. Fate got her a golden ticket. Would you refuse such a marriage if you're the daughter of a rural single mother with the prospect, at best, of becoming a nurse in a clinic, even after many trials and tribulations? In any case, you'd get married and be grateful to your husband for changing your life, even despite his difficult character and unattractive appearance. And Nemesio had a decent character and quite a decent appearance. At least presentable. And his wife was still very interesting to see. He didn't have to wait long. Soon, Adon had the chance to visit Nemesio's home, where he met Eleonora. The slender, thoughtful young woman looked nothing like magazine beauties and even less like rural beauties with their wholesome charm. Eleonora had a special, warm aura. It was clear right away, she was intelligent and gentle. Many wanted to court her, but no one dared, as it seemed futile and a waste of time. It was enough to spend a short time with this family to understand that Eleonora loved her husband. It wasn't gratitude or clever, sober calculation, but that elusive quality not everyone possesses. Nemesio was so sure of Eleonora's love that he wasn't afraid to introduce her to young friends and regular clients. And he praised Adon for her, a young business talent. Eleonora treated Adon with friendly sympathy. Like a cousin, he joked. One day Eleonora came to his executive office. Adon had already managed to set one up. She seemed completely lost, not herself, having experienced some kind of shock. Her eyes were dry, but they held a poignant despair. In a dead voice, Eleonora said, "Nemesio has been set up." She stumbled over the details, not understanding the essence of the matter herself. Her husband tried not to involve her in his affairs and shielded her from the dirty work, but it was clear she was telling the truth. Her husband was now in the hospital. After everything that had happened, he had a massive heart attack. She came to Adon because they urgently needed money to settle with some very dangerous people, and she named a truly large sum. "We'll pay back everything when we can sell the house and the car. If we have to sell the house urgently, the amount will be much lower, and then we won't be able to settle. We'll draw up an official loan agreement so you have guarantees." Among Nemesio's clients, as you know, there's no one else with that kind of money. "I have nowhere else to turn, Adon." "And justice?" he asked. "They'll just get rid of us if we go down that path." Adon felt turmoil inside him. It happened very rarely. He had the needed sum, but it was earmarked for a major purchase, a deal that would elevate him to a new level. He had been preparing for this opportunity for a long time. It was as if he were stubbornly climbing slippery steps, sometimes slipping back down. He needed that money precisely tomorrow, otherwise, the new chance might not come soon or might not come at all, because if he backed out of the deal, his business reputation would suffer greatly. "I don't have the required amount, Eleonora," he exhaled in one breath. "Yesterday I did, but I made a major purchase, so I don't have the money now. Just enough for daily household needs and nothing more. We'll have to wait. I can't even say for how long. If you manage to get some more elsewhere or take out a loan against your assets, I'll help pay it off later." "I understand," Eleonora said abruptly. "I shouldn't have come. Even relatives can't help in such matters. I'm sorry. Please forgive me." She rose abruptly from her chair and headed towards the exit of the office, as if blind. And Adon didn't stop her. He seemed to be numb, and even the air around him felt thick. At the door, Eleonora turned around and said, "If you are interested, Nemesio is in Central Hospital." "I'll visit," Adon awkwardly reassured her for some reason. He didn't go home that evening. He spent the whole night drinking alone in the office. In the morning, he went to the bathhouse to sober up, still alone. If he had suddenly decided to visit his lawyer, he wouldn't have made it in time. Nemesio died the same evening. Right around the time, Eleonora came to Adon. A mutual acquaintance told him about it. Adon couldn't bring himself to attend the funeral or the memorial service. He invented an urgent business trip for those days just to avoid looking Eleonora in the eye. But he did go to the memorial service later, so as not to raise questions. Especially since Eleonora wasn't there at the cemetery. She had gone to her mother's in the village. For good. Forever. She did manage to sell the house and the car urgently, and the amount needed to repay the debt wasn't so great. She took out a loan in her name from a pet shop owner who was also a client of the late lawyer. Eleonora undertook to repay the loan amount gradually, as she could, and the loan agreement was notarized. I know Eleonora will do everything she can to pay, the skinny, bespectacled man who took out the loan said. But if she can't, I won't go anywhere with this paper, I declare in front of witnesses. And Adon never saw Eleonora again. But his friend's wife told him during a chance encounter at a restaurant that, as it turned out, Eleonora was pregnant at the time of her husband's death. She was already in the 3rd month. She gave birth to a healthy boy. She continued to work as a paramedic in the village. Someone would occasionally visit her there and report that everything was fine with her and that her son was smart and talented. After hearing this story, Adon felt an inexplicable sense of relief and almost stopped thinking about Eleonora. At first, he forcefully suppressed the memories, but over time, he genuinely stopped thinking about them. Eventually, Adon's business started to flourish. His daughter was born soon after, and the years passed quickly. "Will you have coffee, Adon?" Eleonora asked calmly and kindly, inviting him into the small living room. "You're here on business, but have you decided to visit an old acquaintance as well? Sit down. My son is at work. He'll be back in about an hour, you'll meet him." "Yes, I'm here on business, but it's personal," Adon replied, hesitantly choosing his words, his gaze wandering around the modest but tastefully furnished room. Eleonora always had good taste. And she had changed very little, despite life's challenges. It was both heartening and astonishing. If one didn't notice the fine lines of wrinkles and the melancholy depth in her gaze, she was still the same, almost like the young wife of the eccentric lawyer. She even dyed her hair almost the same honey color. "If it's confidential, forgive me for prying," Eleonora said with a slightly mischievous smile. "No," Adon suddenly decided, "I'm just confused, honestly. I came to see your son, but I didn't know he was your son. You see, I came to meet my future son-in-law. It turns out that my daughter is going to marry your son. Is it even worse than you imagined?" Eleonora asked with gentle, harmless irony. "I understand what you think of me," Adon replied, "and that you're unlikely to want to be related to me. Just think, what a medieval marquis with dynastic marriages." Eleonora shook her head, taking guest cups from the buffet. "It's none of our business to decide for our children. And why should I think something like that about you? You're an ordinary person, in your way, you're very capable, even talented." Looking at Aglaia, I wondered and couldn't guess who she reminded me of. "She is tender herself, but far from as helpless as my son thinks." "You don't like Aglaia?" "I like her," Eleonora reassured him sincerely and with pleasure. "I understand you, Adon, and I don't judge. You're not too keen on having a son-in-law like my son. You're disappointed, but I'll be glad that Aglaia will be my daughter-in-law." "I just didn't have all the information," Adon retorted. "If I had known from the beginning that my daughter was going to marry Nemezio's son, I wouldn't have worried about her fate. I'm such a medieval marquis, believing in family traits. I'd argue with you about family traits. But in this particular case, you're right. Juan looks a lot like his father in the most important aspects." "Wonderful, then we're all lucky," and Adon, rubbing his hands, reached into his leather briefcase for an envelope. "I didn't bring the money for the wedding for nothing. They wanted to get married in the village, for the ancient romance and all that. You have to order in advance and make a down payment. This should cover that and much more for the time being. Do they have a place to live?" "You'd better talk to your son about all this, Marquis," Eleonora gently stopped Adon. "By the way, here he is. Juan, meet Aglaia's father. He came to get acquainted and discuss the future. Adon spent the whole journey home thinking, and therefore crawled along the highway like a tortoise. He wouldn't have been surprised if he had been stopped and fined for such a suspiciously slow speed. Did Eleonora know that he lied to her then? He didn't give her the money, although he could have. Probably she did. Women like her know everything without any evidence, by instinct. So, she forgave him. He couldn't have done it. And she forgave them for the sake of the young ones, and she definitely wouldn't tell her son what a scoundrel his father-in-law was. Was he getting old if he suddenly became so sensitive? Adon liked the guy, though it was quite a test to look without hiding his eyes, as if at Nemesio. As he could have been in his youth. He didn't take the envelope, saying he hadn't planned to use his unearned wealth. And he wasn't lying, the fool was principled. Well, it didn't matter, Adon would find a way to help the young couple, bypassing the pride of the son-in-law. He just had to do it for the most crude, selfish reasons.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.